Okay, I want to make a video about this debate, but it's gonna take too long for like a short 10-minute video to post on TikTok. So I don't know. I guess I'll just go in live to make the video. And so what's going on here is I've been developing an AI Bonson bot to debate and prove the existence of God in the spirit of a Greg Bonson. And I decided to try my bot out on notorious atheist TikTok troll Tupac420. So he's been trolling theists for years on the internet. And he was a good person to test the bot out on, I thought. Even though it is painful to talk to him. I was interested to see so the bot starts out, we're kind of like, we start out with a little back and forth. I won't get into that. So I start out telling him how just appealing to like the rules of logic is a sandbox toy, not a worldview, right? And why does it need a mind? Why does his worldview need an ultimate mind? Because rules don't write themselves, genius. God's got the pen. Your externalist "it works" is a yawn. Why does it work? Under determination's your escape hatch, but every maybe flops without my God. Tags the king. You're a jester with a paper crown. Keep giggling. I'm laughing louder at your drowning act. Bro, that's just externalism. Yeah, and it's still a wet rag. Logic's reliable because it works. Why does it work? You're stuck in a loop. It's true because it's true. Tag's got a backbone. God's rational nature. Yours is a just so story with no why. A kid's drawing next to my blueprint. Under determination, fancy term. It's a fancy term for I've got options, except none of your options hold water. Name one that grounds logic without begging bigger questions. I'll wait. You'll grant divine conceptualism's coherent? Big whoop. Coherence is table stakes. Truth is the prize. Tag's not just possible, it's necessary. Logic's absolute. Your rules need an absolute maker. Or they're sandcastles. Why is mine true? Because it's the only anchor that fits. God's eternal mind explains why you're even arguing. And so I'm going to have this AI voice. This is going to be Jeff, right? This is the Tupac420, or on Discord he's known as Jeff, notorious atheist troll. So he responds to what my bot said there, and he says this.
How is that an answer to what I asked? Why is your view true and mine isn't? Specifically, why do you need a mind to be the cause of everything else?
So yes, why is my view true and his isn't? Why do you need a mind to be the cause of everything else? So my bot responds, my view, let's call it the transcendental argument for God, says that the laws of logic, like non-contradiction, A can't be not A at the same time. The laws are universal, necessary, and prescriptive. They're not optional or random. They govern all reasoning, including this chat we're having. For them to be that way, they need a foundation. That's equally absolute. I say that's God's eternal, rational mind. Your view, I'm guessing since you're still cagey about it, probably ties logic to something less. Nature, human brains, or a vague, it just exists. So my view, logic is grounded in God. What logic is, right? Logical laws are universal. They apply everywhere. They're necessary. They can't be different. And prescriptive. You ought to follow them. You're using them right now to demand I make sense. So why does God fit? An eternal, unchanging, rational mind, God, can ground logic because logic is eternal. Logic doesn't shift. Neither does God's mind. Logic exhibits a rational character, which reflects a mind that's inherently orderly. Logic is prescriptive, which reflects God's authority, making logic binding, not optional. How could we know logic? Well, if we're made in God's image, our minds can tap into these laws. It's not random luck, it's design. So, in Tupac's view, logic is unmoored. He hasn't spelled it out what his view is, but let's just go over the usual suspects. Okay, so you could say logic's grounded in nature, but if logic comes from the physical world, it's contingent. It could have been different. But logic isn't, it's fixed. Why is it universal? If it's just physics, a changing universe can't birth unchanging laws. You could say human brains ground logic, but if logic's just how we think, it's subjective. My brain, your brain, different rules. But logic's objective. It doesn't bend. Plus, brains are finite. Logic is infinite. If you just say logic just exists, maybe you're a Platonist, logic's some abstract thing floating out there. Well, fine, but why is it binding? How do we access it? No mechanism, no answer, just a shrug. So the verdict is my view is true because it accounts for logic's nature with a source that matches. Eternal, rational, personal. Yours isn't because it leaves logic hanging, either contingent, subjective, or mysteriously there with no explanation. Mine's a foundation, yours is quicksand. And you zeroed in, why specifically a mind? Great question, let's drill it down. So logic's like a rule book. Laws of logic aren't suggestions, they're rules, consistent, intentional, and prescriptive. Think chess. The rules don't bubble up from the board. A mind designs them. Logic's the same. It's a system, not a fluke. A mindless source, say random nature, can't produce rules. Why? It's chaotic, contingent, purposeless. Rules imply intent. Intent needs a mind. Mind versus no mind. So the mindless option, imagine logic arising from atoms crashing or just being. Why is it universal? Why is it necessary? Why should we follow it? There's no answer. It's a brute fact with no backbone. Contingent stuff like matter can't ground absolutes. It's too shaky. So the mind option works better because a rational, eternal mind sets logic as a standard. It's universal because the mind's scope is infinite. It's necessary because the mind's nature can't change. It's prescriptive because the mind has authority. That's God. Coherent, not arbitrary. Why not something else? Abstract objects, like Platonism says logic exists independently. Well, okay, but how's it enforced? Why do we obey it? It's inert, lacks the personal push to make it an ought. Physical laws, so physics change, logic doesn't. Plus, physical stuff is descriptive, like what happens. It's not prescriptive, what should happen. Logic is the latter. Logic is what should be the case. What if it's nothing? What if it just is? Well, if it's just there, that's a dodge. Why is it there? Why does it work? It just does isn't an answer. It's a punt. The bottom line is that logic needs a mind because only a mind can author rules that are absolute, knowable, and binding. No mind, no anchor. Logic's a ghost. God's mind fits. Nothing else does. So you asked why my view beats yours and why a mind's needed. I've shown that in my view, God's mind explains logic's traits. Yours, whatever it is, can't without breaking down. The mind requirement, right? So logic's rule-like nature demands a purposeful source, a mind. A mindless option crumbles under scrutiny. So his response, the genius atheist response, this is what Tupac says.
P. Mars' logic being grounded in something natural doesn't mean it's contingent. The way I see it, logic should be understood as laws of how things operate and are abstractions beyond the physical laws and metaphysical laws. They are necessary because the physical, metaphysical laws could have been otherwise. but only within the confines of the logical laws. Go ahead and tell me why a natural state of affairs, or even a natural necessary entity, couldn't do it. Last time you said, "'cause that's not a thing." And the logical laws are prescriptive in the sense that you ought follow them if you want to preserve truth. Stance-independent norms are spooky and unnecessary IMO.
He says stance-independent norms, objective morality is spooky and unnecessary.
And the logical laws aren't. That's just the way it is. They are necessary. The world couldn't have been any other way in that regard.
He's trying to argue that they're not arbitrary because they're necessary, but he's not saying, like, why are they necessary?
The reason you spaz out every time you talk to people about this is because you have cognitive dissonance about the obvious fact that all you're doing is simping for one of many possible explanations.
Oh, I'm doing a debate review, so I'm probably not going to take calls. Maybe after. Okay, so, Jeff's doing his thing. So I respond to him. I give him a quite lengthy response. So I say that if logic is grounded, now this is the Bonson bot, mind you. If logic is grounded in something natural, we need to know what that something is. Is it the physical universe? That's contingent. It could have been different. There could have been different laws, or they could have not existed at all. A contingent foundation can't guarantee necessary laws. It's too shaky. If you mean a natural necessary entity, you got to define what that is. Like, what is it? Is it a force, a principle? Without specifics, it's just a placeholder. Here's the deeper problem. Logical laws, like the law of non-contradiction, A can't be not A, they aren't just how things operate in nature. They're prior to nature. You can't even imagine a universe where contradictions hold. It's incoherent. Logic dictates what's possible, not the other way around. If nature grounds logic, but logic binds nature, you've got a circular mess. Logic can't pull itself up by its own bootstraps. Your view traps you in a loop with no exit. Suppose it's a natural state of affairs. Say that we have the universe is. That's still contingent. The universe could have been different, not existed. Contingent things don't produce necessary truths. Necessity requires something unshakable, not a cosmic roll of the dice. Now, a natural, necessary entity sounds promising, but what is it? You're not telling us. Is it eternal, rational, personal? If it's just a brute force or abstract form, how does it ground logic? Logic isn't just there, it's universal, knowable, and binding. A mindless entity, say a Platonic law floating in the void, might be necessary, but it doesn't explain why we can grasp it or why it governs thought and reality. It's a dead end, it just is. Contrast this with Tagg's God, eternal, rational mind that grounds logic. It's necessary, God can't not exist. Personal, explains why we can know it. And prescriptive, reflects a rational will. Your natural entity is a shadow, vague, undefined, and powerless to account for logical's full scope. You argue logical laws are prescriptive only if you care about preserving truth, dismissing stance-independent norms as spooky and unnecessary. This is a dodge. Logic isn't optional. You don't get to pick it like a diet plan. If you ditch it, you're not just not preserving the truth, you're incoherent. Try arguing without assuming non-contradiction or identity. It's gibberish. You are using logic to make this very point, proving it's inescapable. That's Tagg's strength. Logic's prescriptive period, not if you feel like it. Stance-independent norms are spooky? They're not spooky. They're the bedrock you're standing on. Logic doesn't care about your stance. It's the rule book you've already been playing by. Deny it, and your words collapse. Your own argument relies on the very thing you're questioning. Isn't that ironic? Sure, logical laws are necessary, Tag agrees. But why are they necessary? What makes them so? You got no explanation, just they are. That's not grounding, that's a shrug. If logic's necessary but ungrounded, it's floating fact, disconnected from anything deeper. That's begging the question, not answering it. Tag ties logic's necessity to God's unchanging and rational nature, a concrete foundation. Your view leaves it dangling as a just is dressed up as an answer. Without a source, you've got no way to explain why logic holds universally or why it couldn't be otherwise. Tag isn't one of many options, it's the only one that doesn't crumble. Your natural grounding is a non starter, too vague, too weak. You haven't offered a rival that explains logic's necessity, universality, and prescriptiveness without tripping over itself. Tag's God does the job. Eternal, rational, personal. His natural entity, it's a ghost with no substance. You're not giving alternatives, just sniping from the sidelines. If you've got a better explanation, let's hear it. Until then, Tag stands tall while your argument flops. Then he begs me to DM him. And he says this.
It's a necessary, eternal, unchanging, non-mind that is sufficient to explain universes. How is that incoherent? How is it less of an explanation than a God? I told you how it grounds logic. Why is it incoherent?
He told me how it got. I've been explaining to him why it's incoherent. So I said, listen up. You're floundering in a puddle of your own natural mush. Simping for logic's fairy that doesn't even show up to the party. Tag's got God's steel. You've got a sandcastle and a smirk. Keep bowing to your ghost ground. Maybe it'll haunt you into a real argument. Keep bowing to your ghost ground. Maybe it'll haunt you into a real argument. You're an intellectual lightweight. Anyways, I told the bot to insult him at that juncture. So then I say he's asking, there's a necessary, eternal, unchanging non-mind that is sufficient to explain the universe. How is that incoherent? How is that less of an explanation than God? And then I say, you're putting forward a necessary, eternal, unchanging non-mind as the foundation for the universe and logic. I'll assume this is some abstract entity, like principle or law, that just exists, independent of any consciousness. You assert it's sufficient, but asserting something doesn't make it true. Let's test it. What is this non-mind? A force? A mathematical structure? A cosmic thing? You haven't said. Calling it necessary or eternal doesn't tell me what it is or how it works. It's a label with no explanation. Without defining it, it's just a placeholder. Coherent as a concept, sure, but incoherent as a foundation that actually does something. Logic isn't just a description of how things are. It's prescriptive. It tells us how we ought to think. If A, then B isn't optional. A non-mind, by definition, lacks intent or reason. How does a mindless entity produce a system that demands rational consistency? It's like saying a rock invented math. Possible as a story, but it doesn't hold up. Logic reflects thought. A non-mind offers no thought to reflect. Logic applies everywhere, across all times, places, and possible worlds. Why? Your non-mind is just there, but you haven't explained why its existence forces logic to be universal. It's static and inert. How does it reach into every corner of reality? Without a mind to sustain or impose it, it's a local quirk, not a universal law. And how do we know logic? If it's grounded in a non mind, there's no connection between its existence and our ability to grasp it. It's just floating out there, inaccessible. A mindless entity can't reveal itself or design us to understand it. It's a dead end. You claim you told me how it grounds logic, but I'm not seeing it. If you mean it's necessary and logic just flows from it, that's not an explanation. It's a restatement. How does a non mind generate or sustain logical laws? What's the process? If it's eternal and unchanging, fine, but that doesn't tell me why logic exists or why it's binding. You're skipping the how and hopping the assertion sticks. It doesn't. You ask, how is it less of an explanation than God? Here's why. God is a mind, eternal, necessary, and rational. Logic reflects thought, and God's mind provides the source. A non-mind has no thought to offer, so it's a blank state. It's a blank slate where logic's structure should be. Logic's ought comes from God's authority. As a personal being, he commands consistency in reasoning, aligning with his nature. Your non-mind is impersonal and inert. It can't command anything, so logic's binding nature remains unexplained. God's omnipresent. Eternal nature ensures logic holds everywhere. Your non-mind might exist eternally, but why does it govern all reality? There's no reason. It just does. You say God's scope is inherent, your entity is tacked on. We're made in God's image, designed to reflect his rationality. That's why we can know logic. Your non-mind has no relationship to us. It's a silent wall, leaving our grasp of logic a mystery. You insist it's perfectly coherent, or even if vaguer than God, which you dispute. Sure, it's conceivable. I can imagine a non-mind existing, but coherence as a concept isn't coherence as an explanation. A magic eternal widget is coherent too, but it doesn't explain why logic is necessary, universal, or knowable. Your non-mind stops at it exists. It doesn't do the heavy lifting God does. I'm not dodging. I'm hitting your argument head on. You say it's sufficient for the universe in logic, but it's a shell, no rationality, no authority, no connection to us. God's a complete package. Your non-mind's a fragment pretending to be a foundation. If you've got a real how for grounding logic, bring it. Otherwise, it's just noise. Your move. So your necessary, eternal, unchanging non-mind is incoherent as an explanation because it can't account for logic's rationality, universality, or prescriptiveness. It's less than God because it lacks the attributes, mind, will, design, that makes sense of logic and our access to it. It's not enough to say it works. Show me how, or it's game over. And then he told me to stop posting so much. So he responds to what is it? So when I asked him to describe his mind, what is it? His response.
I'm happy to answer that when you tell me what God is. You know you can't explain how God works, right? You say, well, he thinks things into existence. I say the natural thing is disposed to cause things. What's the difference in explanatory depth here?
It's like he's just totally ignored. Didn't answer the question there, and asked me questions. So this is what they do. They don't answer. He doesn't answer your questions. He just asks you questions. He also said this.
I already answered this. Modus ponens preserving truth is a descriptive fact. The ought comes from an agent wanting to preserve truth. Given they want to preserve truth, they ought use MP. It's really not that difficult to understand.
He's saying the oughts come from what you want to do. So I want to preserve truth. Therefore, I ought to believe in modus ponens.
Its nature is logical and can only be disposed to cause events that are logical. I'm agnostic as to how it reaches everywhere. It can be through existential inertia or some non-causal grounding relation. I don't know. Either is fine.
He's trying to explain how logic is universal, and or like how his non-mind can universally apply logic. And he says its nature is logical and can only be disposed to cause events that are logical. What? So like the non-mind can only cause logical events and it has a logical nature. He's not going to explain how it's universal. It can be through, and then he gives options: existential inertia, whatever the hell that is, or some non-causal grounding relation. I don't know. Either is fine. It sounds like just nonsense. Woo. Like, okay, so why? So here's the question: you're going to such mental gymnastics to deny the truth of the Bible. He's willing to believe in. He's arguing that there's a existential inertia by a non-mind that is just naturally predisposed to cause things to be logical, or that there's a non-causal grounding relation between the non-mind and how it just naturally disposes events to be logical. Like, does this make any fucking sense? Why would you believe this shit over the Bible? This is just goofy. It's totally incoherent. He doesn't care, of course. Then he responds to how do we know logic? The epistemic question. Oh no. So I did hit a limit of how much text to speech I can do. It's so stupid. Okay, whatever. I'll just voice it. Existential inertia is not nonsense. Okay, sure. So how do we know logic? Jeff says, we know logic because our minds are embedded in logical reality. Everything behaves logically and our minds track the world. This is begging the question. The rest of it is just you giving the same level of explanatory depth that I did and pretending what I said doesn't make sense. No, dude. How is that explanatory depth? You have no history. There's no history. Like, why is this true? Like, I have a history of God interacting with people. Anyways, he says, your inability to read isn't an argument. Oh, good one, Jeff. So I said, God in the Christian view. So when he asked me to, he wants me to explain how God works, which I already had, but he just ignores that, of course, because he's, committed to atheism, not committed to truth. So anyways, he asked me to explain how God works. He wouldn't answer my question until I answered his. So this is how God works. So God in the Christian view is an eternal, necessary, or to define. This is a question about defining what God is. Because he wouldn't. I asked him to define what his non-mind thing is, and he wouldn't define it. And he goes, "You define your thing." So I'm responding to Jeff here. God in the Christian view is an eternal, necessary, personal being, omnipotent, omniscient, and unchanging, with a rational mind and will. He is the triune God of Scripture, one essence, three persons, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, self-existent, not caused by anything else. That's who he is, not a vague thing, but the ultimate reality behind all else. Now your turn. What's this necessary, eternal, unchanging non-mind? You got the floor. Right, he's not going to answer. He says, yeah, mine is all those things other than the personal and not triune. Also, it can in principle be described by mathematical law. So he just wanted me to define my thing so he could do like this tu quoque. This is so... this is how they debate. Like, oh, I'm going to get him with the tu quoque. Like, it's like his mind is operating in gotchas. So the atheist mind, since they can't truth track and they just evolved into a gotcha. He's looking for a gotcha constantly, while getting waxed, and just ignoring the fact that he's getting completely waxed. So yeah, he says. Jeff says, yeah. Tupac 420 says, yeah. Mine is all those things, other than personal and not triune. Also, it can, in principle, be described by mathematical laws. Again, how does mine not have the same depth, explanatory depth? Even if it didn't, why wouldn't it be coherent? And then he calls me a dodger. And I respond, God's a mind, rational, intentional. Logic's a system of thought. A non-mind can't think it up. Your entity's a blank slate, no purpose, no design. God's unity, one essence, and plurality, three persons, mirror logic's universals applied to diverse realities. Your non-mind's a monolith, no depth bridge the one in the many. No depth to bridge the one in the many. That was an answer to his saying, like, how do you have more explanatory power than my thing that I invented that's not real? And I explained that. Because you need the Trinity, right? For the one in the many. You need a rational, intentional, because rationale and intention, because logic's a system of thought. Okay, anyways, so he goes, now he responds, says, I don't know how adding a logical problem to your view makes it a better explanation. I don't know how... I'm saying mine solves a logical problem, and his response is, I don't know how adding a logical problem helps a better explanation. It's an explanation to the logical problem. I don't know if he's, like, intentionally an R word here. This guy's really impressively dumb. Pretty impressive. Recorded nonsense. It's not recorded. I'm going over a debate. I'm trying to make a video about a debate I did with a famous atheist troll that's been trolling theists for years, named Tupac 420 on TikTok. So when he did the tu quoque, I was like, oh, my non-mind has all the same properties. So I say, you ask, how does mine not have the same depth? Logic structured. Laws like A isn't not A aren't random. They're rational. God's mind gives them a source. His eternal reason. Your non-mind's got no rationality. It's mute. How does it produce a system of thought without thinking? It's like expecting a rock to write a symphony. Nice try, but no dice. Logic's binding. You ought follow it, not just if you feel like it. God's personal will makes it an ought. He designed it, commanded it. Your non-mind's impersonal. It can't command squat. Mathematical laws describe it, sure, but why should we obey? Depth's in the why, not just the what. You're missing the muscle. How do we know logic? God's personal, made us in his image. He wired us to grasp his rational order. Your non-mind's a cold entity. No intent, no link. Why can we tap into it? It's there. It doesn't explain access. God's design does. Your explanation's a stub. Mine's a root. Saying it's described by math is a flex, but math's abstract. Logic's more. It's not just numbers. It's rules governing thought and reality. A non-mind might fit math, but how does it fit generating or enforcing logic's universality? God's mind authors it. Your entity just sits there hopping math papers over the gaps. God explains logic's origin, a rational mind, authority, God's personal will, and knowability, God's design. Your non-mind's a static is, eternal, sure, but it doesn't do anything to ground logic beyond existing. It's a shallow echo, not a rival. You ask, even if it's less deep, why isn't it coherent? It's conceptually coherent, yeah, I can imagine an eternal non-mind, but as an explanation for logic, it's incoherent. How does a non-mind cause or ground logic? You say it's disposed to cause things, but a non-mind has no intent. How is it producing a rational system? It's a leap with no bridge. Logic's prescriptive, binding across all minds. A non-mind can't prescribe it, it's inert. Follow it if you want truth, it doesn't match reality. You're using it as absolute, not optional. That's a disconnect. Why is logic everywhere? Your non-mind's eternal, but how is it enforcing logic across all possible worlds? God's omnipresent will does. Your entity's a bystander. It's coherent as a vague idea, but not as a foundation. Too many hows left hanging. God ties it all together. Your non-mind's a loose thread. You call me a dodger? Wrong. I'm answering your non-mind lacks depth because it's got no rationality, no will, no link to us. God's got all three. It's not coherent as an explanation because it can't account for logic's full scope, origin, authority, reach. Tag's not one of many. It's the only one standing when the dust settles. Your math, law, non-mind is a toy next to God's steel. Pretty, but it don't swing. And then I think I asked it to insult him. And I go, "Hey, Jeff, still beating that dead horse? You're trotting out the same tired lines. Ethics from wanting truth, universals from logical nature. Like they're gold. I've already buried this. But since you're too stubborn to quit, let's dance one more time and watch your non-mind trip over its own feet. Ethics, modus ponens, and the ought dodge. You say modus ponens, if A, then B, A, therefore B. Preserving the truth is descriptive, and the ought only kicks in if the agent wants to preserve truth. Given they want truth, they ought to use it. Cute, but it's a paper-thin dodge. Logic's not optional. You're not just describing modus ponens, you're using it like it's binding. Whether you want truth or not. Try arguing without it. Gibberish city. The ought isn't conditional. It's absolute. You're proving it right now, demanding I make sense. Where's that absolute norm from? Your non-mind, it's got no will to impose. Tying the ought to an agent's desire is subjective. Truth's optional if I don't care. No. Logic's grip is universal. It's not pick and choose. Tag's God grounds it in his rational, authoritative nature. Your want truth, use modus ponens is a sandbox rule. Mine's steel. And I already answered. I told you logic's prescriptive. It's not a wish list item. Your non-mind's got no juice making it binding. God does. You're recycling a busted tire. Roll it back to the dump. So Jeff says, in response to how this explanatory depth, he says, the structure of my non-mind isn't random. It's necessary. That's what I'm talking about. You're not reading. It's not moot. It's moot, not mute. Logic qua the extension isn't a system of thought. Logic qua intention is a system of thought. That's what minds do. Normative realism just makes your view worse, in my opinion. Relegating norms to hypothetical imperatives is incoherent and better explanation. I already told you how we know logic. You're not responding. I told you how logic is enforced and explained. Read. You need to be more concise. You look like a crazy person. I mean, he's just saying that I'm wrong without, he's not giving an argument. So his argument is, I told you so. I already told you. But he didn't give an argument. All he did was say, I think this. I think that. Well, I told you I think this. Well, I told you I think that. He's not defending anything. He's not answering any of my questions. This is atheism. So I say, you claim your non-mind's nature is logical and only disposed to cause logical events. shrugging off how it reaches everywhere with essential inertia or non causal grounding. I don't know, either is fine. Seriously? Logic's nature isn't a buzzword. What is it? A non mind can't be logical. Logic's a system of thought, and your thing's got no brain. Disposed to cause logical events? How? It's inert, no intent, no mechanism. Saying it only causes logical stuff is a claim, not an explanation. Where's the how? Agnostic on how it reaches everywhere, how it's universal. That's not an answer. It's a punt. Existential inertia, stuff keeps existing, or non causal grounding, it just is everywhere. Pick one, defend it. Both are vague cop outs. Tags God is omnipotent, enforcing logic everywhere. Your non mind's a local ghost. Why is it universal? Dunno ain't cutting it. A non mind causing logical events without a mind to design them is incoherent, like a blank page writing a novel. God's rational will ties universals to his nature. Your logical disposition is a wish with no wings. And then he just laughs at me. So I say, you're laughing, adding logical problems makes it better. Nice try. But you're the one juggling nonsense. Tags God isn't a problem. He's the solution. Eternal, rational, personal, grounding logic and universals. Your non-mind's the mess. No thought. No thought to explain logic. No will for ethics. No reach for universals. I'm not adding problems. I'm solving yours. You're the one stuck with the dunno circus. Hilarious, but not helpful. And he calls me dodging. Enough dodging. This is Tupac. Oh, crap. I skipped around now. So he goes, enough dodging. Give an argument with a conclusion. If logic needs to come from a mind. And I say, man, you're stubborn like a broken record. Ethics from wanting truth. Logic from a brainless blob. I don't know how it works. That's not an argument. It's a comedy routine. Tags God has got the goods. Mind, will, everywhere. Your non-mind's a limp noodle, flopping around with no spine. Keep cackling like clown. Your house of cards is folding while I'm cashing the checkmate. And then he goes, oh, you're trolling. Oh, you're trolling me. Oh, I'm Tupac 420. Oh, you're trolling me. Oh. So he asked for a premise, conclusion, argument as to why there needs to be a mind. So then I give him the argument, right? Premise 1, logic's nature. Logic's law, like non-contradiction. Logic's laws are universal, apply everywhere, necessary, can't be otherwise. I've already given him this argument, he just ignores it. And prescriptive, you ought to follow them, not optional. It needs a source, premise 2. So it needs a source, necessary, universal, prescriptive laws don't float. They require a foundation matching those traits. So premise 3. The mind fits. Only a rational, eternal mind can anchor such laws, intentional, unchanging, with will to enforce them. Premise 4. Your non-mind fails. A mindless, necessary thing lacks rationality. It can't create thought systems. Will, it can't prescribe. And connection, it can't explain or grasp. Conclusion, therefore, logic needs a mind. God's to ground it. And then he just goes, his response is, all those premises are false. Hey, do you know that rejecting premises to an argument is not a counter-argument? You have to, why are they false, Jeff? Why are they false? Why are they false? You can't just say, I reject your premises. That's not a counter-argument. You have to give like a reason why they're false, or like some undercutting defeater, like that would what would an undercutter do, like show that like what you're saying has no meaning or something like that. So I respond, you say, what, I keep skipping. He goes, all those premises are false, which is not a, it's not really, that's not a substantive response. That's just hand waving. You say your non-mind's necessary and its structures isn't random. Great, but why? It just isn't an answer. It's a dodge. Here's why it flops. Structure's necessary. You claim logic's extension, its existence, isn't thought. It's, isn't thought just... While intention, our system, mind's work. So structure's necessity. So Jeff's claim, Tupac 420's claim, is that logic's existence isn't thought. It's just moot or pointless to debate. I don't know. Oh, he's saying that it's pointless to debate logic's existence. Okay. While intention, our system, is mind's at work. Fine, it's split. But logic's necessity still needs a source. Your non-mind's a blank. How is it structuring anything without intent? God's mind designs. Yours is a ghost with no blueprint. Hypothetical imperatives, oughts if you want truth. That's weak. Logic's binding, not choice. You're using it as absolute right now, not if I feel like it. Normative realism, God's will, fits your want to truth. Dodge makes ethics a shrug. Tag's got authority, you've got whimsy. How we know it? You say you told me. Where? It's there doesn't link it to us. God's image wires us to know it. Your non-mind's got no plug. Enforcement, existential inertia, or non-causal grounding. That's dunno dressed up as how is it universal? God's omnipotent enforces it. Your thing just sits there hoping. Oh, then he accuses me of question begging. But I've been giving him mad arguments. So you see how fake these people are? Like, I've been giving this guy mad arguments, and he just keeps like dodging, like Neo in the Matrix or something. So he says premise 4 is question begging. I say premise 4 is not question begging. Logic's a system, structured, coherent. A non-mind, by definition, has no thought. How's a thoughtless thing producing a thought system? It's not begging, it's basic. No mind, no rationality to author logic. Logic's prescriptive. You ought follow it. Not just if you want. A non-mind's got no intent, no authority. How's it making rules binding? That's a gap, not a circle. I've got the answer in God. Why we grasp logic? I'm just repeating in the same shit. He's just not responding to what I'm saying. We grasp logic. A non-mind's inert. How's it linking to us? God's personal, designs us to know it. Your friends, it's there doesn't bridge that. Mine does. So premise 4 isn't assuming only mind's work. It's showing a non-mind doesn't work. It fails the test logic sets. That's the argument, not begging. And he just goes, I've already responded to all of that, which he didn't. He's not answered the questions. So, and then I took it to his DMs. Oh, I don't even have hardly any DMs with him. So I go, where's your contention with Precept? Like, where do you think it goes wrong? And he goes, in one sentence, Precepts arbitrarily dismisses alternative worldviews. And I said, yeah, because they all reason without reference to God, and that's impossible. So what's the issue? How is it arbitrary when we have an argument to back it up? The tag, he says, all that matters is how, if knowledge, then God is defended. And the most I ever see is an explanation being given, almost always a very shallow one. Then defining anything else is impossible without any argumentation. So he's just saying I've been literally just arguing with him in the text. And he's just saying it's not arguments. So this is their counter argument. You're not making an argument. That's their counter argument. That's just an appeal to like incredulity. Like login needing to come. Oh, so this is. He says this isn't an argument. When I say logic needs to come from a mind is the most bizarre thing to say in the first place, and you guys say it's necessary. Lol. But I gave him like a million reasons why that's the case. So I say, so you want an argument why logic needs a mind? That's funny. I remember giving you one. You didn't respond to it. So I said, so do you think logic is necessary, universal, unchanging, prescriptive? Like, do you think logic is contingent? And he says, I think prescription only comes from minds. So no, I don't think it's universally prescriptive in that way. But he thinks it's necessary, he says. So I asked him like his account of logic, and he goes, dude, lol, you didn't read, I've told you a million times. Did he ever give me a clear account of logic? He kept saying like, it could be this, could be that, there's this, that, this, oh, it's this, and blah, blah, blah. Like he was cagey the whole time I was talking to him. I've been totally clear and upfront. This is my position. I believe the Bible. So I say, you take like every position and defend it. How am I supposed to know what your position is? And then I push him on like moral anti-realism. And he just says like, well, if you want to follow the truth, then you have to follow logic. But what does obligation even mean if it's not a part of your goals? And I said no one would have to tie their arguments to truth, so truth wouldn't even matter if moral anti-realism was true. He says, of course it would matter. Truth matters if you want to know what truth is. Truth matters because of my fantasy. No one has to do anything. But if you want to track truth, then you have to follow logic. That's the only not insane view, in my opinion. Objective normativity is bizarre. If I were a Christian, I would reject it. This guy's talk about bizarre. This guy's an expert on bizarre. So I say, so this demonstrates your error. You're implying being sane in reasoning is better than being insane. That's a value judgment. If moral anti-realism was the case, why is sanity preferable? If no one has to do anything, why bother tracking truth or following logic? You say truth matters if you want to know what truth is, but without an obligation to care about truth, your pursuit of it becomes a mere preference, no better than ignoring it entirely. If there's no objective reason to value truth or logic, your own argument collapses. You're trying to have it both ways, denying absolutes while leaning on them to make your case. And he says, yeah, that's what I mean. Sanity is preferable. So I asked him, why is sanity preferable? And he goes, because sanity is preferable. I mean, this is atheism. And I go, yeah, why is it preferable? And he goes, because I have a base preference for it. Oh, it's preferable because it's preferable, and I also have a base preference for it that I prefer. So that's why it's preferable, because it's preferable and I have a base preference for it that I prefer. That's why it's preferable, see? I mean, does that make sense to you guys? Because I have a base preference in knowing true things, probably because in general knowing true things is useful. Well, why is it useful? That's another objective use. But beyond that, I have a preference to know what's true. That's cute, Jeff. You got a preference. You also must prefer to be a total shitbag online. Guess you prefer that. Why does it even what does it even matter for an ought to be objective? Have you stopped to think about what that would even be? Like, I don't even know what the fuck people are talking about when they say that. And then I say to him, when you say logic is universally true, not prescriptive, just descriptive, you're implying it's more than just your preference. You're suggesting it holds up everywhere for everyone, whether they buy into it or not. That sounds like an objective claim sneaking in the back door. If moral anti-realism is your game, though, where 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 there are no objective moral truths, then all standards, including logic, are just human constructs or personal tastes, right? So why should logic be universally reliable? If it's just something you prefer, like chocolate over vanilla, what makes it connect to truth for everyone? If someone says, I prefer to be illogical and make stuff up, you likely think they're dropping the ball, not just doing their own thing. You'd want to say, hey, you should come back and care about logic and truth. But in your view, that should isn't objective. It's just you talking. Moral anti realism strips away any weight behind it. So when we argue or debate, like right now, and when we expect honesty and consistency, what are those expectations based on? If they're not grounded in something real, they're just arbitrary rules we could ditch whenever we feel like it. Even in this chat, we're playing by unspoken rules. Be logical, be honest, stick to the point. If I started spouting nonsense or lying, you'd call me out, and rightly so. But why? If moral anti realism holds, those rules are just preferences, and I could opt out with no real foul. Yet, we both know that wreck the conversation. These norms feel binding, not optional. Moral anti realism can't explain why. So Jeff said, Bro, lol, the descriptive part is objective if it's objectively true, no matter what people say. The following modus ponens preserves truth. However, there is no objective truth that you ought follow modus ponens. That's just so wrong. And then he goes, they should follow it insofar as I think people should do things that are logical. I don't think there is any should beyond that. Dude, he's not doing anything logical in this whole conversation, but he thinks people should be logical. He prefers to be logical, just not himself, I guess. I don't. Then he goes, yes, because I expect you to hold. Oh, when I said that you expect me to be honest and consistent in our conversation, he goes, yes, because I expect you to hold these intersubjective norms. If you don't, I will say you are cheating and laugh, because you will be admitting you don't care about truth. Try to understand that. How do you care about truth when you're arguing things that make truth impossible? Fucking dickhead. Try to understand this view. Like, not only it is coherent, it is the only one that isn't metaphysically bizarre. This is the same stuff Jim Bob says, and the inability to you understand makes you guys look like liars or our word. Like, I'm not being rhetorical. It makes me think you guys are actually really unintelligent. And then I said, you're saying logic's objectively true descriptively. Modus ponens works, no matter who's watching, but there's no ought making us use it. Just your preference. Cool, but here's the rub. If moral anti-realism's right, and nothing's objectively binding, why is logic universal? You treat it like it's more than a quirk, but without a foundation, like God's rational nature, what's it standing on? You'd call me out for nonsense, not just a game foul, but because it's wrong. Yet your view says that's just your vibe, not a real standard. If logic and truth are just norms we pick, why do they feel solid? If I say they're grounded in God, you're using them like they are, even if you won't admit it. Your setup's coherent till you push it, then it's floating. My take's not bizarre, it fits. What's holding yours up? Then he just accuses me of giving up. No, he says I'm not responding. He asked me why I'm using ChatGPT, and I said because I'm a moral anti-realist. And then he laughed at me. And then he says, logic is universal because everything that exists can only behave in a certain way. That's begging the question. You think of them as degrees of freedom. The logical laws are the broadest sense of freedom. I'm not interested in talking to you anymore because you're beating me so bad. And then I asked him, like, well, why do these limits exist? Why is reality locked into behaving rationally at all? Could be, maybe, he's not going to answer this, right? Could be some universal grounding as a priority monism. He's not defending his position. He's just, it could be, I don't know, whatever. It could be these. Those limitations are aspects of the grounding substance. Could be that there isn't some grounding, but reality is an infinite series of events. The limitations there would be due to antecedent cause. And there would be existential inertia, but an infinite gress is like obfuscating the fact that you have no argument. Those are two broad options. Either one is fine. They're not fine. It's defend one. In the same way that you want to say God has properties, well, there would be properties here. I think their disposition is really that hard to understand. It's not the same way that... See, God, it makes sense that God has properties because God has a mind, so he can define and limit his properties. Why would Jeff's non-mind have, like, where is he getting properties from? I say, but why do those properties exist? Why is the substance or chain rational at all? You're still stuck explaining why has reality got this consistent groove. I say God's nature grounds it. You dodge the why with more what? Properties need a source. Mine's got one. Yours is still hanging. And he goes, that's like asking why God's properties exist. So I say, why do God's properties exist? Easy. God's the ultimate reality. Why do God's properties exist? Easy. God's the ultimate reality, self-existent, non-contingent on anything else. His properties aren't random. They're his nature, eternal and uncaused. Logic's universal because he is. Your monism or infinite chain still need a why for its properties. I don't. That's the edge. What's up? Says, no, you got it backwards. God is the ultimate reality and self-existence because his properties are necessary. Jesus Christ, dude. And that would be true of the base naturalistic substance. The base naturalistic substance. What is that? What is he talking about? It's just goof. Like, why are you, like, defending the base natural? So it's more rational to believe in the base natural substance than in Jesus Christ. Why? What makes you... he's just asserting things with no reason, and based off the things is totally inconsistent and incoherent, because this can't explain logic. So, yeah, it might be coherent until you try to explain logic, and then it falls apart, right? Just a joke, dude. Think about what you're saying. The reason it's not chaos because regularity is necessary. The same way God is good because it is necessary aspect of his essence. There is no further effect that can be appealed to. You're saying I've got it flipped. God's self-existence because his properties are necessary. But your naturalist substance could roll the same way. Regularity is necessary like God's goodness is. No deeper why needed. All right. Jesus Christ indeed. But here's the problem. A personal God's necessity explains intent behind the regularity. Logic, order, purpose. Your substance necessity just is. No reason. It's rational instead of random. That's still a leap. God's essence ties it together. So there's no reason why his priority monism is rational, right? It just is rational. Well, like, my God's rational because he has a mind. You see? But he's just gonna ignore this. And so he just ignores me. And so that's basically the debate. That's basically it. Is there anything more that gets said? Oh, he argues that like he keeps arguing for prime. He doesn't understand how um, if the ultimate reality doesn't have a mind, it's going to end up being like contingent because there'd be no explanation for why it would be necessary. Oh my god, this guy is like hopeless. So like this is what happens. It's like I don't know what's wrong with this guy's brain. It's like crazy. Like so I mean this is just proof of the Bible, right? Cuz like the Bible will say um if you deny God's existence, he'll let you gaslight yourself and like no one has gaslighted themselves more than Tupac 420, cool guy Jeff on Discord. Like unbelievable. Unbelievable. How many times did I explain it to him and he just kept ignoring me? And like accusing it's just crazy. It's just crazy. What's up, Matt?
Hey, how's it going? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I kind of caught the tail end of the conversation there, to be fair, but I think you were talking about the laws of logic and they can't be explained. Could you just expand on that a little bit about what you were saying? I don't want to misquote you.
Yeah, I was just saying that like only Christians can explain logic because if we look at logic, it's like absolute, personal, um, or it's absolute, unchanging, universal, prescriptive, eternal. So those are like the qualities of God. Because,
Um, okay,
because
sorry, go ahead.
because logic is a concept. It's like an idea. It's not real. We need God to make logic real. Because otherwise, like, what would make logic real? You know, nothing would do it.
Well, I mean, but you say that we can't explain them, but I would just have to disagree. I mean, the laws of logic are just simple principles that we follow to um, not confuse the things we observe in reality, right? So I don't understand why you think that they
Because
have
like
to.
because it's like why does reality behave that way? So like God would explain why reality behaves that way. It operates by those principles.
Yeah, but that's just a post hoc explanation, right? I mean,
Not a post hoc explanation because there's no other explanation.
well, that's your claim,
Okay,
but I mean,
okay,
I can
okay.
understand
Well,
why.
okay. You're claiming you're making a counterclaim. Something else explains logic. So what's absolute, unchanging, universal, prescriptive that would explain logic?
I don't think anything absolute or universal has to explain logic. We can explain it very easily.
Well, it does.
Logic is just a set of principles that we
No,
use.
it's not. It's
Yeah,
not. It
it
has to be
is.
true prior. No, you don't understand.
I do understand.
No, you don't. Human minds can't create logic
How do you know that?
because logic is absolute, universal, and unchanging. Human
How do you
minds,
know that?
because if logic wasn't absolute, you would go touch a hot stove, but you don't touch a hot stove because logic's absolute.
Okay, so then whenever we look at things like quantum mechanics and say we accept the Copenhagen interpretation, we see particles that move up and down at the exact same time. Now that violates the law of non-contradiction, which shows that the laws that we follow, logic, don't always apply to every aspect of the universe because we look at it on the quantum scale, they just don't make sense on that scale.
That's
So
not
that's
that you don't
proven
live
by
your
the
life
fact
like
that
that.
logic is not absolute.
All right,
Logic,
well then go. Okay, if you, I don't believe you unless you touch a hot stove. So are you
what?
gonna touch a hot stove?
Why would I touch a hot stove?
You won't because it's an absolute truth that touching a hot stove will burn your hand. You deny that.
I'm not going to touch a hot stove.
Were you a flat earther, dude? Are you a flat earther?
P bars. I think you're obfuscating for what I just said here. Can we go back to the
I'm
quantum
not
mechanics?
obfuscating. Quantum mechanics doesn't change the fact that touching a hot stove will always burn your hand.
Okay, it doesn't,
Quantum
but it
mechanics
does
doesn't
though.
change that, does it?
I didn't say that it did. I said quantum
Okay,
mechanics
so it's not
the
it's not
laws of
relevant.
logic
I'm
are
saying that
not
I'm saying there's
absolute. They
dude,
don't
I'm saying
apply
that
to every aspect.
I'm saying absolute truth. Like if I say it's always true that touching a hot stove is going to burn your hand. You believe that. That's an absolute truth.
What if you didn't have pain receptors?
What if you had a brain and you could think, and then maybe you would, not say something so dumb?